Our next keynote speaker is Mr. Chinmaya Hardas, Regional Director for India, Syncron. Mr. Hardas will speak about leveraging technology to capitalize on the world's new service economy. Please welcome him with a loud round of applause. Over to you, sir.
Hello, everyone, again. I hope this is audible. It's a bit confusing from here, but hopefully I'm audible. Yep, perfect. Thank you. So firstly, I think there's been a lot of discussion already around the technology part of it or the digitization part of it. I'll continue the conversation, go a little deeper in terms of when we talk about, from a Syncron perspective, what do we have to get it into market. A lot of points from Vishal's presentation that I'll kind of dig into as well to take it forward. But before I go in, a quick intro on Syncron itself. We are a company that's been in operation for a little over 20 years. Headquartered out of Stockholm in Sweden. Here in India, our operations have been about 2.5 years when we set up the sales, service, and support system here. We're based out of Bangalore and Hyderabad mainly, so that's a quick one on us. The focus for Syncron is very specifically aftermarket. That's the thing that we do. We have software solutions to optimize the aftermarket operations. You've seen digital tools in the earlier presentation that Vishal presented in terms of most of it obviously is customer focused, right? How do you make the customer's life easier in terms of booking a service, in terms of parts visibility? So there were different aspects of it. What is required also is at the back end, how do you kind of stitch all those things together so that you're not dropping the ball? One thing coming in, is it actually getting communicated to the next level internally, right? So that's something that we enable at the back end. So we are more of a back end, not a front facing in a way as well, to say so. So I'll start off. I'll first start off with automotive industry trends just to begin with, and why are we looking at technology and talking about technology in the first place. And some of it has been spoken about, but very quickly, none of this is independent, right? Everything is going to be interrelated in some way or the other. So if you're looking at connectivity, we have connected cars already. We have a lot of data coming in from these cars already into the system. But how are we leveraging that data? What are we doing with that data to create customer-specific products or services, or kind of make the customer's life a lot more easier in that sense in terms of their overall ownership experience that they have over the years. So that is one of the key things that we look at to say that that is definitely going to disrupt, because today's generation is a connected generation. They do expect you to know a lot more than coming in and asking, right? I mean, when you're taking a car in, it is expected that you would know what the problem the car is having. I don't have to tell you what the problems it may have. We're getting to that level of connectedness, and that is the expectations that are coming through as well. In terms of electrification of the powertrain, obviously it has an impact in terms of the lower number of mechanical parts, hence impacting the service in some way, right? But it brings up other challenges. It is a lot more, as I said, sensor, electronics, electrical components. So the way the service is going to be executed is obviously going to change a lot. And that is going to, again, have an impact in terms of what role a technology can play in kind of enabling that is another thing. Direct to customer sales, in the connected experience itself, you're talking about the customers selling or customers buying journey completely being digitized in a way, and not limited to the car itself or to an extent services itself, but also going forward in terms of accessories, merchandise. It could be any of the associated components that you want to kind of package in there, right? You don't have to be limited only to the parts or do the service itself. There's a lot more that can be done based on the customer's profile that you can come out with. Extended service plans, subscriptions, anything that you can think of. And finally, of course, sustainability is an important aspect as well. Shared mobility plays into that. People are conscious. Do I really need to be driving 2 hours, at least here in Gurgaon and in Bangalore, where I come from? We do end up driving alone in a car for 2 hours, and you see multiple of such cars with one occupant. That's really not good for the environment in a sustainability perspective. That obviously is going to have an impact we're seeing in terms of carpooling applications and things like that. But of course, in that, in terms of ownership overall. Do you really want to even own a car? Can I subscribe to it? Can it be a small packages that I can kind of go out with, right? So there are different aspects of it that come out again. And all of this is obviously going to have an impact in terms of how the overall experience, after-sales experience, in some cases, not a sale at all, and after-subscription experiences in some cases. So that is what, in a broader term, we are tracking as a technology company to say, what technologies do we need to have at the back end to enable these processes to make it a lot more efficient? Very specifically from an industry to a service transformation perspective, today, majority of it is in the reactive preventive mode, wherein it's a break fix or you have scheduled maintenance calendar set out that 6 months, X kilometers, you come in with a service, right? So you have the first two buckets that you're in, wherein you today are still a lot more transactional in the sense that, yes, you come in, we'll probably look at the car, this is at these points, we'll replace these things, and that's what is kind of packaged into the service itself. But with the data coming in, with the connected experience coming in, can we be a lot more proactive? Can we use the sensor information in terms of proactive maintenance, being able to identify failures or potential failures before they happen, and be able to trigger that, hey, this is something that we feel is wrong. And today that's again happening. We call it as uptime centers, but this is happening more on a single sensor basis. We really are still away from looking at the interaction between these sensors, right? The engine itself could have multiple of sensors that is pulling the data. What is the interaction between them? And from there, getting into a predictive mode, wherein you're able to kind of not just predict it, but also kind of be ready with a resolution. So I know there's a failure that may potentially happen in a week's time. I know what parts would be probably required to do that maintenance. Can I be ready, geared up, and prepared that, hey, can you come in such and such date? I'll have everything ready. We'll fix it up. You talked about a four-hour maintenance turnaround time. That's something. In order to enable that, this is something that is required. I think one of the things that was asked by Mr. Narula was, how do you enable that 4 hours? I think the answer talked about the request coming in, the packaging happening, the milk run happening. But what if the part is not there? What if you couldn't predict what part was required? It could be there at the mother warehouse where you have predominantly all of the parts, but what if that the local regional center, it's not there, right? You have to be a lot more efficient or be ahead of time to plan for it as well. So that's what we talk about when we say predictive in a sense coming through as well. Yep. And I'll not go into all of this, but when we talk about servitization, again, we're talking about it being as a service, right? It is no more selling a product, but you're selling a service itself. You're basically selling number of kilometers or an uptime guarantee on the number of kilometers that you can get to drive in a certain amount of time. So that is one. I'll just touch upon the last two here because the others have already covered the changing workforce part of it. I touched upon it in the earlier panel as well. So we have a lot of younger generation coming in who expect things to be done in a lot more efficient, online, connected manner. We need to be catering to that. Otherwise, just retaining the workforce also kind of becomes challenging from an OEM planning perspective. I don't think we're there yet in terms of the dealer manpower or the dealer technicians, but it'll get there fairly quickly as well. And the distribution channel complexity. We've talked about the dealer distributor networks, which is predominantly there, but online is coming in a big way as well. So that basically brings in another kind of competing channel that you yourself would want to run through an Amazon, Flipkart, whichever way that it kind of goes through, right? And there are a lot of independent mechanic channels coming through as well, which again is going to be competition to the OEMs coming through. So that has to be looked at to make it a lot more efficient, to be productive, to be competing against all those different aspects. So I've been talking about it. So what do we do about all of this, right? So what we have is what we call as the connected service experience platform. The intent here is to be the operational backbone for the entire service operations that you are running today. And we have multiple solutions that kind of cater to the different aspects in the aftermarket operations. I'll touch upon them real quick. So I'll start with the inventory because that's the oldest. Everybody does inventory management. That is nothing new. Everybody does it at the OEM level for the warehouses. They do it at the distributor level through a DMS system, predominantly with a min-max simplistic solution. But what we're talking about is, can we kind of go a little deeper? Can we look at statistical tools, models, use a lot more robust forecasting mechanisms to be able to plan that out? Can we have different optimization capabilities, which talks about looking at which parts are contributing more, what is the frequency of demand. So there are different aspects. It's not about, yes, inventory. If you look at it or commonalize it or generalize it in a way, you'll say, hey, X part, X quantity, Y part, Z quantity. But what was the frequency? How is it a daily? Is it like one bulk in a month? What happens? So all those aspects do have an impact in terms of how you would plan your inventory strategy at the warehouses, at the mother warehouse, the regional warehouse from an OEM perspective, but also taking it down to the dealership itself. If the OEMs are not looking at planning or helping plan the dealer inventory in a more active way, it is obviously going to have an impact in terms of the customer experience, that the customer comes in and there are going to be complaints that, hey, my car was not given back to me, 3 din ho gaya, gaadi nahi mila. Those kind of things are going to happen. So it calls for a more active participation. The reason I'm putting the onus in a way on the OEMs is because the dealer distributors do not have the sophistication to be doing this on an independent basis. The large ones, yes, but the smaller ones, no. So there has to be a very simplistic approach that you give an order recommendation that's based on a lot more scientific information coming through as a recommendation to the dealers itself. So that's the piece that we're talking about. You see 2 buckets there in terms of inventory. One is what we call as the dealer inventory. The other is the OEM inventory, which is more for the warehouses. It's a similar concept, but the scalability factor is what it kind of changes in there. The next one I'll get into is the pricing part of it. We've talked about profitability earlier. I've said that pricing has a major impact. It's a high margin business. Even a 0.5, 1% difference you're going to make is directly going to add to the bottom line. There's no 2 ways about it, right? So again, what we've seen still very traditional in its approach, in the sense that, yes, we may have system, we may be on Excel, but it is still broad-based segments with certain margin expectation, engineering-based classification and margin expectations. But if you were to take and ask, we said we have 3 generations of vehicles. Murli sir was talking about it, BS2, BS4, BS6. If you ask in BS6, can there be a lot more captive parts? Is the competition lesser? Is there a lot more IP that is in there that can protect, that can let you kind of derive a little more in terms of certain parts? Answer is yes. Are we differentiating? Probably not to the level that we can extract, right? So that is an important aspect. How do you look at it? And how can solutions like this help you point towards what are the parts that you can probably have more granular segmented strategies is what we're looking at. And an extension to that is what we call as contract pricing or AMC pricing or long-term. Again, Vishal talked about 5 years, 7 years kind of contract. I can't imagine a 7-year contract, but if that is where we're reaching, we need to cover for the risk. You talked about inflation. That's one factor, and inflation has impacted all of us in the last 1 year for sure. What probably we planned out 3 years back, we were not covering up this year for sure. Inflation is one factor. Inflation obviously has an impact in terms of labor rates. In service, labor is an important component that comes in. Material, the raw material pricing change. All these factors, how do you kind of factor them in when you're designing a 3-year, 5-year package? But that's, you don't necessarily have to limit to that, right? You can also look at the usage pattern. Is this a fleet buyer? Is it an individual customer? Is it an individual customer in a coastal area versus an inland area versus a hilly area? What is the usage pattern going to look like? What is the traditional, in that service area, what is the traditional replacements of parts happening for these kind of models? Leverage that information to say what risk would you carry if you're going forward with a package? Will you be profitable? It's not a one-size-fit-all service package that may probably work for everyone. We're not saying do it individually to a customer. We're not there yet. But at least can we make it a more general, commonalize around specific regions, products, and usage patterns is what we're saying. And finally, the third one is what we call as the service fulfillment portfolio. Here is where we basically have our field service, which is more like a CRM DMS system wherein you could schedule, you'll have your all wins, the service schedule set out, the reminders kind of going through the customers, the entire customer service history is kind of being managed there. So that is one piece of it. Warranty is about, I'm rushing through because I see I only have 2 minutes. Warranty is about being able to have all the different stakeholders, the customer, the dealer distributor, the OEM and your suppliers in a single thread to be able to do the claims adjudication process a lot more quicker, having a lot more visibility as to where does the recovery lie in terms of all of these claims. And when you're doing the warranty process, reverse logistics also does come into picture. You want to pull back some of these parts, be able to, I don't think in the cars, there's a lot of refurbishment, but when we go to construction mining equipment, the refurbishment piece also becomes a very important topic because these are expensive parts that can be reused in some way. So those kind of things do require reverse logistics, bringing them back into the inventory part of it, and all of those chains kind of get added out. So yeah, end of the day, what we're talking about is from an inventory perspective, the right part at the right place at the right time. That's typically what we say. With the right technician and the right skill, with the right data available or the contextual information available to execute the service, and for the customers doing it at the right price. For the customers, could be a part price and contract price, but also being profitable or improving profitability for the OEM itself. So that's the bottom line of what we're looking at with a solution like this. Again, as I said, whatever Vishal has shown as front-facing, this becomes the backbone to kind of connect. There's data coming in from all those different apps at different points. So there's a service scheduling happening, but how does that kind of feed into an inventory planning to enable the four-hour promise that you're doing, right? So the backend has to be robust as well, and that's what we enable, and that's what I wanted to share with you all. Thank you. Just for reference, and this is coming from benchmarks from our existing customers on the inventory side, the larger ones, Ford, Nissan in the US, Daimler Trucks on the pricing side, again, Daimler Trucks, Alphatem. So there are multiple customer references that kind of have enabled these metrics. I'll bring it up, I'll not speak to it, I'll take questions. We've been in India for the 2 years, we have 5-6 customers onboarded. However, on one-to-one is what I can't probably share it on a public forum, but I will on one-to-one.
Mr. Chinmay, it's really very interesting.
Thank
we
you.
are a new age company, and we are also looking at developing a lot of this in-house, and probably you'll solve a lot of our problems. By the way, I represent Ather Energy here. So my question is, you spoke about the warehouse management, the pricing, some aspect of DMS, and the last one was warranty management, and end-to-end with the supplier. It's a little difficult to believe, but I hope it happens. But is there anything to manage the workshop operations end-to-end from the way where vehicle gets in and the vehicle comes out, so that we can focus about the workshop efficiencies and productivities in much more detail?
Yeah, so in terms of the service fulfillment, we do have workshop management as well, but in terms of optimization, it's not. It is more a planning engine in the sense that when the vehicle is coming in, or how many vehicles are coming in, how many bays do you have, how many technicians do you have, can you have a skill matrix against them to say that what technicians can do what kind of works. I was talking earlier, I think around the same topic, on skill matrix to say that if there's a mechanical problem, an electrical problem, a body related problem, how do you kind of manage those technicians? Not everybody is going to be able to do everything. So we can do the assignment of the bays, assignment of the technicians, but the optimization part is still not there in that specific piece, because that's an important piece. The system being able to recommend how do you optimize and be able to, because you have work hours or labor hours associated with certain works as well. Using that, being able to optimize is something that we're still working on. But we do have a module in service fulfillment.
And to add on to that, almost all the automotive OEMs use their respective DMS, and there's a lot of other softwares which run in the backend. So how easy is the integration of Syncron with most of the traditional softwares like Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, TechIN, or SAP in the backend too?
Sure.
How cumbersome is that?
Yeah, so again, I've talked about the connected service experience, but it's completely modular. Everybody starts off at a certain point and then kind of gets into other areas as well. We have to integrate with an ERP. We are not a transaction system. So be it an SAP or an Oracle that you talked about is typical, that will be there. We will have to integrate it with those. And we do have the integration points set up. There are different methods in which we can do that. I'll not get into the technicalities again. But we have to, and we do that. That's without which, like the daily transaction data coming in is very important for both inventory as well as pricing. Pricing, why? Because at what price points, if I've made a price change, what's the impact in terms of my market share volumes? Is it dropping, going up? Either ways, I need to have that information coming in. So we do have to integrate, we do that as well.
To felicitate Mr. Hardas, I would like to invite representatives from MG India and iTriangle. Our third keynote speaker, Mr. Chinmaya Hardas. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.